A special thank you to Whoopton Wizards for supporting the channel. Feel free to purchase any singles or product with my affiliate link below. Any purchases help support me to make future content and are greatly appreciated. Thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at this match that I played the other day where I actually successfully pulled off a fatigue strategy into Chane, so that'd be important to talk about. So we win the die roll, so we actually want to present as much damage on turn 1 as possible. We maybe could have overpitched to just stack Massacre with Blood Rush Bellow, but I don't think it really matters because we're not trying to actually do damage this game. We're just trying to full block until they don't have a deck anymore. But I do want to present damage on turn 1 because you'll see those are actually two pretty decent cards that the Chane player could have played, and now we draw them out of their hand. Or at the very least, now we've actually reduced the Chane player's deck size essentially by 2 or maybe 3 if they block with 3 cards. I actually think it's really important if you're on the play to just like attempt to do as much damage as possible, and by that I mean you get them to block with that many cards because those are now cards that are out of the deck for the rest of the game. So after that, our opponent comes in with a Rune Chant into a Bounding Demigod with Go again. And we're just going to try to efficiently pay for Arcane Barrier the best we can. Having Rhinar is a little bit easier because we get access to Null Rune Gloves and Skullhorn, which allows us to have 3 Arcane Barrier. I actually think that Skullhorn is better than Skullcat, mainly because Chane doesn't really have any on hits. It's mostly just presenting raw split damage sometimes. Well, mostly raw damage, but sometimes split damage as well. But there's not really a whole lot of on hits except for maybe like Shadow Puppetry. And so I think if you're only running 1 Arcane Barrier, he has the ability to leak a lot of damage with cards like Rosetta Thorn and Inverted Existence, which we just saw our opponent pitch, so we know that eventually that's going to be hit through Soul Shackles or in their hands, something like that. So I think because of that, you actually want Skullhorn. You'll get more life out of it. And pretty much most of this matchup is going to be having as much life as possible. And I think that's mainly how you're going to win into Chane. The main reason why is because for anyone who's not very familiar with Chane, Chane builds up these things called Soul Shackles. Once a turn, you get to make 1 more. They give your next Runeblade action Go again, but the Soul Shackles actually banish the top deck of your, or the top card of your deck every turn. Now, Chane has a lot of cards with Blood Debt that can actually be played from the Banish Zone directly. So the Soul Shackles are actually part of the strategy. It basically gives Chane like 7 card hands late game because you'll banish like 3 or 4 Blood Debt cards that you can play, and then you'll have 4 cards in your hand as well. And Chane's ability will give some of them even like Go again. So that's kind of like Chane's strategy, but obviously it comes with the risk that they actually banish to their deck very quickly. Now you'll see here I actually did take damage to set up Command and Conquer just because they have an arsenal. And maybe you could have made I think there was definitely an argument that we could have actually just blocked out that turn, but I did want to at least pressure their arsenal, mostly because Reckless Swing can't, be played by itself, so it's actually not that efficient of a block right now. And I did want to maybe pressure a card out of their hand, which slows down their strategy a little bit, or even getting armor from them. Getting Carrion Husk is really good because then it means that they can't stall late game by just pitching to Grasp, attacking with Rosetta, and then the Ursa token, which is going to be the end game pretty much of Chane into something like this where we're trying to grind it out. They're going to try to set up Ursa so that they have that really nasty late game combo that does like over 20 damage and still leaves a 6 attack that can go every single turn until we clear it. So a big part of this is going to be obviously managing our life total. We're not really interested in attacking. It's very boring if you don't like playing defensive, but I mean it is it's an exciting strategy for the sake that you have to put together this puzzle of figuring out how to efficiently block throughout the entire game so that you don't lose too much health in an unnecessary way, so that when the Chane player finally assembles that crazy last turn, you're not completely dead to it and you can actually win past that. If you can survive that turn and you can restabilize, I guess, like the board state, you're in a really good shot, or you're in a really good place to actually successfully fatigue it. So now we see Eclipse, which is the card that will give them Ursa if they play 6 Blood Debt cards in a single turn. They can be from Banish or they can be from hand. It actually doesn't matter. But that is the card that we're going to try to plan for. One way that we're going to do that is, it's very easy with Rhinar, but we're going to find a way to put 1/6 attack power, or 1/6 attack in our arsenal. And the reason for that is because we need to attack Ursa for 6. There's a lot of different ways we can do it, but we have to set that up in Arsenal so we don't have to sacrifice too much to clear it off the board. Now here, we're going to use, like here's a good example of putting together the best way to block, right? So with my current deck list, I actually do need to sideboard in one pummel, which is a non-3 block, which is what you don't really want to Chane, because you want every card to block for as much as possible so that we can keep our life total high. But there's no way for us to go to 60 cards unless we're either putting in non-blocks or we're putting in pummel. So pummel has to come in, so you have to put together like the perfect way to block out their entire hand with pummel, while making sure that pummel isn't like basically a bad card, right? So we wait, we see 5, and then we're like, great, pummel and another card now efficiently block. And pummel no longer like loses value for being only a 2 block here, right? So that's one example. And so now we see something like Shadow Puppetry, which is going to be the only on hit, where if it hits, they get to banish the top card of the deck. And that obviously can hit another blood deck card, which they can play. So that's pretty much like a good example of like when to pull the trigger on a defense, like a defense reaction, like a Sink Below or a Fate Foreseen like this. With the only difference being that if they just play a 4 attack, then you're probably fine just using the defense reaction then. This is like the only card with an on hit, and so like I said, you're just trying to make sure they can't leak a whole lot of damage through. You kind of like, you would ideally want to be at 40 life by the time they set up the Massive Eclipse turn. That's obviously not going to happen. They go really wide and they have enough breakpoints that they're going to get damage through to you, but that is like the ideal scenario, right? Is that you're actually able to manage your life total really, really well. Into other decks, like if you're playing Briar or something, obviously this isn't going to really work. You have 2 blocks and you also have non-blocks. And so that's just an example of a matchup where you are going to be forced to just race them. But I'm purely talking about this from a more mid-range style deck like Rhinar. Obviously something like Oldhim would be like a very, very obvious example. But there are decks that can actually efficiently block out Chane the entire game and then eventually have Chane banish this entire deck. So that's mostly what we're showcasing today. And so right about this point in the game, Chane is obviously building up Soul Shackles. They're hitting lots of cards every turn. Now we actually get insanely lucky here and they hit all generics, although that doesn't really mean much because now it's just more generics that have been sort of filtered out of the deck, which means that the actual concentration of hits increases. Right now there's more cards with Blood Debt left in the deck if you hit that many generics. So like it's not perfect, but there is a little bit of luck involved in terms of like, does Chane like absolutely hit gas every single turn? Although the thing is, because Chane pitch stacks, they're sort of guaranteed to eventually. They do have kind of an inevitability in terms of eventually banishing a bunch of Blood Debt cards that were all intentionally pitch stacked together, as long as they don't shuffle with something like Belittle into Minnowism. So that's just something to keep in mind, right? And we're just trying to come back with a club whenever we can. We would like to sort of pressure their life total very slowly. You know, if they're going to attack in for 1 and we have like a 3 block or something, you might as well just keep it and pitch it to club back. You can't let them sit at 40 life the whole game sometimes, just because you would like to pressure maybe a block from them or a piece of armor, just especially trying to get rid of Husk, so that way they can't just stall the game out for too long. And they'll eventually start like killing themselves with Blood Debt. That's just, I mean, it's not important. You're not going to like, it's not a deal breaker, but it is like a way to sort of get a little bit more insurance. So here we're just going to see like Physical Thorn for 2 and 1. And yeah, I mean, this is a consideration, right? So I just decided to take it because I'm assuming saving a 3 block for something else that may come would probably be more efficient. Now, it turns out there actually wasn't much. It was a bit of an off turn for my opponent. So now we actually are left with like a ton of cards. And so what I end up doing is just doing Red Barraging Beatdown, pitching into club, which is going to then pressure my opponent to go down to 20, right? So then maybe a couple extra Blood Debt that they take, plus another club now starts to threaten Husk being broken. So this is just an example of like very carefully knowing when to sort of pressure life total. Just like only when it's appropriate, only when you have the ability to, and you're not like sacrificing your life total. If you're sacrificing your life total, it's definitely not worth it. But that is one instance, right? So Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, like, it's not a super complex sort of strategy. I mean, honestly, this video could be wrapped up even sooner, but I did want to kind of showcase the entire match. You're pretty much just asking yourself, like, okay, how can I block to the best of my capabilities, sacrificing every single card in my hand, knowing the right time to use defense reactions, when it's appropriate to use armor. That's pretty much most of the fatigue plan into Chane. Although there is a really important additional concept of knowing what card to arsenal to deal with Ursa, because the late game is going to be Ursa, right? That's the inevitable end game, is that our opponent is going to play 6 cards with Blood Debt and they're going to get Ursa out. So the question you have to ask yourself is, like, how am I clearing Ursa? Now, you saw earlier we actually put Beast Within in our arsenal. The reason why is because it's basically a generic 6 attack, right? Like when you're actually playing it, but it doesn't require any additional costs. It can be played off a Tunic and a yellow or a blue pitch. And so we need to arsenal a really easy to play 6 attack, right? Like not something that requires an additional cost, like a discard or something. So like Massacre, Swing Big, and Beast Within are all great targets. And you just want to put them in your arsenal and get ready just to immediately clear Ursa off the table as soon as it hits. Now you'll actually see we go back on that here. We're actually, and I think it's a misplay. I actually think I misplayed here. But I can kind of tell that Ursa's probably going to come out this turn, right? Our opponent had a setup turn with 5 cards. They hit a bunch of Blood Debt. They just used Art of War. They have Eclipse. Like, it's kind of, and they chose Go again too. So it's like kind of obvious that we're probably about to get Ursa'd here. But the problem is my opponent plays a card with Shadow Puppetry, the on hit, and they at that point had played 5 cards. And so I was actually wondering if they were trying to maybe get a bit lucky and go for it and hit the 6 off the top. Now they still had a card in hand. It was very dumb. I totally misread their hand. And I sort of misplayed by then deciding to block out with my entire hand, when what we should have done is we should have just kept the high roller to pitch Beast Within, attacking Ursa, cleared off the table immediately, and then passing back, and we probably win, right? So here's an example of like how explosive these turns can be. So we started this turn with 30 life. If we went really any lower, we would totally be dead. So if we were trading damage at this point and like taking like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 damage a turn to swing back at the Chane player, like we would have been absolutely blown out here. But because we managed our life total so well in the early game, we're able to even misplaying and letting Ursa stay on the table 1 extra turn. We're actually totally fine, and fatigue Chane not somewhat easily, but efficiently, right? So here we see like a Creeper's activation into Shadow Puppetry, giving 2 action points, like using Creepers, using Art of War. Like these are all like this textbook ways to get all 6 cards played so that you can Eclipse. And so this is what I'm saying, right? The rational thing to do here is to block with Smash Instinct, and then keep High Roller and attack back with Beast Within into Ursa. But I'm just like, I don't know what went through my head. I think sometimes Fab players get locked into like this really bad this trap of it has an on hit, so I need to sacrifice my plan to block it out. Now sometimes it's actually correct, but I think this is an instance where it wasn't. I think that I should have just stuck to the plan and just blocked for 3. And so because of that, my opponent is going to get Ursa out. Obviously, they were going to get it out anyway. I mean, they have 2 cards. I don't really know what I was expecting. But not only are they going to get Ursa out, they're going to have it stay on the field for 1 more turn, because now we can't obviously play Beast Within from our arsenal with no cards in hand, because we need something to pitch. So the problem is that Ursa gets 1 extra swing that shouldn't have even happened to begin with. So yeah, that was one problem, right? So yep, so you'll see it here. So you'll see it come in for 8, and that was a problem, right? It felt really tempting because we had an efficient block with Scav Skins. We get to deny the on hit trigger, but I think that was a little bit foolish. We should have stuck to the original plan of saving the blue pitch to attack and clear Ursa off the table, because now we're gonna have to stare down Ursa for an extra turn that was not necessary. We didn't need to take 6 extra damage from Ursa. Now the argument you could make is, okay, so we don't block with Smash Instinct, we take 3 and then get to banish a card. What are the chances that that card is playable and that card does more damage? Like the question is, like, if they get an extra card off of that is there a chance that they actually do more damage than keeping Ursa on the table for one turn? I just don't think it was possible. I also don't even know if they even had an action point to do so. We're already past the point in the video. I'm just watching this back in real speed. Obviously sped up and edited just because there was a lot of thinking on the Chane player's part. So this is like really condensed. If you want to, you could even like slow this down and turn the audio off if you want to analyze the game yourself. But yeah, I'm mostly just kind of covering the overall concept of how I want to play into this, which is just going to be efficiently blocking, sacrificing, doing damage, but still knowing like when to take an opportunity, like something like a CNC. I was fine taking a few extra damage. That way I could set up an arsenal pressure on them, and try to slow them down a little bit, attacking on turn 1 to get extra cards out of their hands, so now their deck size is essentially even smaller. And so now Ursa's on the table for an extra turn, and now we come to our senses, right? Well, I mean, also we don't have that huge crazy setup turn, right? With like with creepers and Art of War and all of this in a 5-card hand, like there was definitely a lot more going on that last turn. But we're still taking a ton of damage here, like especially not being able to like block with all of our cards, and now we're gonna take an Eclipse hit, or sorry, an Ursa hit. But like think about this, like if we're even at 10 lower life, like we would be so screwed. So you just have to accept from like the very first turn that you're just committing. You have to know on the first turn if you're committing to a full fatigue plan or not. You can't decide halfway through. If you decide halfway through, you've pretty much already lost, right? Because we managed our life total to the point where I think we were at like 30 health last turn, and like we still like almost died, right? Like it was actually still pretty close. This one time out, right? Now our opponent has no cards left in deck, and we're at 9 life, and they don't even have Ursa, and that's where you want to be. Like I think even like 4-3 life is okay. You just want to have a way to not like die to things like Invert Existence and like Rosetta Thorn in one turn. And yeah, so I think at this point I realized I pretty much have succeeded in fatiguing Chane. Ursa's not on the table anymore. My opponent's down to only a few cards left. I have access to 12 block in my hand, technically 14 if you include my armor. So I'm essentially at 23 health. I can pay 1 off a tunic for like a thorn, and so my life total is way too high. I don't think there's any line I can think of that the Chane player can do where I just like die on the spot. And now, like, even using these last few cards, these are now cards that are not going to be coming back in their hand, and now they're down even fewer cards. So, like, we're just completely fine from here on out, and we pretty much wrap up the game like that. So, yeah, so you'll see me here, like, obviously bring Arcane Barrier 3, so we actually pay off for the Rune Chant, the Thorn damage, and can block the physical on the Thorn. After that, my opponent was just kind of like, yeah, this is probably it, right? Because they have 3 cards, 4 cards if you include Invert Existence, and we're still at 9. So, like, we pretty much did exactly what we came to do, which is just block out every single thing. That way we survive the Eclipse turn, and also setting up a way to kill Ursa, even though we didn't stick to the plan, even though we should have. But yeah, that's it. So there's a lot of different ways to handle this. But that was one example using Rhinar. I think Rhinar has a pretty good shot at doing this consistently. I've been consistent with this plan. I just kind of want to share it with you all. So yeah, thanks for watching.